tonight, and we have a few folks that are still getting some nibbles, and but I want to go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone. The journey we've embarked upon has been both a pleasure and revealing, and that we have learned so many details and worked so very hard to stitch together data and details into our plan of action. As I look out over the room, I'm pleased to see so many familiar faces and some new ones. And I'd like to ask our task force members that are present tonight to just raise your hand or stand up and identify yourself. You've been an integral part of this process all along, and we really appreciate it. Familiar faces fill me with a sense of accomplishment and renewed focus as we were here this evening to listen and process that which the Curry Housing Study Action Plan has in store for us. Seeing new faces gives me hope that with the help and support of many hands, minds, and can-do spirit, Curry County will dig in and realize short and long-term recommendations contained in the action plan. A little bit of housekeeping. If the restrooms are out the door, you can see the women's restroom right from the double doors as you walk out. If you turn to your left and go past the elevator and take another left, the men's room is there. If you guys know me at all, you know I have a little bit of an emergency management background, so I'm going to cover the if we have to leave for an unexpected event. Obviously we're going to exit out of whatever door is best under the circumstances, but if we could all gather together out into the parking lot, that would be great. Thank you. You've helped yourself to appetizers and refreshments. I don't need to go over that. And without further ado, I want to introduce Marsha Hart from the United Way, sponsoring agency.
Welcome everyone. Let me see if I can get this to work now. Magic. So United Way is the sponsoring agency for the Curry County Comprehensive Housing Study. I wanted to go through a little bit of the process with you on how we got here today. Take a couple of minutes and before we have our really who we want to listen to, and that will be Thomas making the presentation. It really all started with a group that called itself the Coos Curry Housing Coalition that started to get together back in 2017 originally to take a look at housing at that point in time. The group consisted of government agencies, private nonprofits, public agencies, all of us getting together to take a look at what we were trying to do about housing at the time. We took on a charge. We thought what we would want to do is we want to find funding and complete a comprehensive housing study for Coos County in spring of 2018 and Curry County by fall of 2018. So here we are, fall 2018, and we've completed our two projects that we've set out to do. We also wanted to make sure to help our communities develop plans for workforce housing in the areas of all areas from middle to high income, from middle income wage earners and lower income wage earners, as well as helping our communities develop plans for subsidized housing, housing vulnerable populations, which include seniors, disabled, mentally and physically challenged, and the rest. But we also want to share our process with other counties. And even at this time right now, we have other counties that are coming to us and asking us to come in and talk to them about how we set forth and how we got to where we're going. We set our priorities to formalize the process, develop and fund these studies, and to support Curry County Housing Task Force in its efforts to get a housing study off the ground. So just to take a look at what our budget looks like, actually we went about and we wanted to raise $55,000 for our budget. We're $10,000 short, but we have to say that we actually earned enough, or were able to raise enough money to come out even. So, congratulations to all of you who helped us with this phase of the study. As we talk about the action planning afterwards, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves again and go out and see how we can fund the rest of it in order to make some action happen here in Curry County. So, back in April of this year, Coos County concluded their housing study, and we had a housing summit in April. Just after that, Beth and the group from Curry County approached us and said, hey, you know, we're ready to do it in Curry County. Could you come down and talk to us about what you did, what were the results, and where we could go? So at that time, we came down and we approached and made a proposition to extend the contract from CZB, who had done our study, to Curry County. In June, the Housing Task Force voted to accept the offer, and we were rocking and rolling from the first day as soon as that happened. Thomas, who helped us with ours, was right on track starting in mid-June. In July, we had focus groups that were arranged by Beth and Georgia and our task force. We had them in Brookings, Gold Beach, and Port Orford. A draft of the study was sent out just a couple of weeks ago for people to comment on, and then here we are today on October 4th. So what have we learned through this process? One of the things that we really learned early on was we needed to know who our champions were in the community. We needed to find contributors in all sectors who could influence and make decisions, and we needed to have those people on board. Because if we didn't have those champions, we needed to be able to develop them in those sectors. We also needed to budget wisely. We needed to know the cost of what we were going to be doing, because nothing is free. It's the cost to organize focus groups, to send out communications, to engage the community, all have cost, whether or not it's volunteer or whether it's actual money to fund a buffet. Our community needs to have skin in the game. For every dollar that people put into this, the value to them is exponential. So we need to make sure that we have all skin in the game as we move forward. Again, there's a cost to everything, so we need to be able to contribute to make, even if it's an in-kind donation. And even if it's $150 or $50, we look for everything there. Some people will say no, or not understand the need of the study. We don't stop. We may have to reframe the conversation, or we may need to change their mind with more information. So don't give up on anyone. Share the results, whether they contribute financially or not. Funders value collaboration across the sectors, community engagement, alignment, and efforts in partnerships. And that's one thing that we've found through this whole process is the incredible partnerships we've been able to forge, and we're moving forward with those partnerships. Make sure your consultant is willing to be present in your community and talk to your key stakeholders. Very, very important that we have that. And the more communication with your consultant, the better. Oops, missed a page. Again, just essential that all of us in the community work together, live united. That's what we're all about. It's been a pleasure for United Way to take this on as the nonprofit for your fiscal agent. And so if there's any questions about the process, I'm here to answer those. And throughout the meeting today, feel free to come up and ask any questions. But I think we're really here to hear Thomas give the study, and so I'm going to hand it over to him. Yours is the second.
Okay, there we go. All right. Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, Beth. It's nice to be here. It's been interesting for us. We had the opportunity to do, as Marcia noted, a fair amount of work up in Coos County, and so it's been a pleasant opportunity to come down here and work in Curry County. And I'm from Utah, and so anytime you get the chance to come to the coast, it's a great opportunity. So got to come through the course of spring, summer, and fall, so we appreciate that. As we work through this tonight, as we walk through this plan, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and just say, hey, stop, hang on, I don't understand something. Part of our goal tonight is to make sure that you understand some of the data and some of our findings, to understand how we got to some of the recommendations, conclusions, decisions that we did. We think it's important for you to understand exactly what the impacts are in the community upon housing, how we are in the situation we are. And we do housing all over the country, and there's different situations in different places. Whether it's housing in the Midwest, where we're working with Rust Belt communities that are shrinking smart. What do we out in the West, we're growing smart. You hear smart grow, but they're shrinking smart. They have a different set of problems. And so whatever the issue is, it's important to know that housing is an issue in a hot market where you can't afford it. It's an issue in a market that simply doesn't provide it for its workforce and or its middle income. And it's an issue in struggling communities because the quality of the housing just isn't there. Again, Midwest and some of the Eastern Rust Belt. So as we walk through this, don't hesitate to ask questions because it was important for us that we do understand the numbers. We do want to thank everybody who contributed. We had, we've said this a couple of times, and the amount of people that have attended the focus groups that have reached out to us, whether by phone or email, has been pretty impressive. And so it's that kind of commitment that can actually make housing work. Before we start jumping into some of the numbers, am I in the way actually? Am I in the way? Okay. It's important for us to make sure that you all understand that housing is first and foremost a result of what goes on in the community. Typically, a community is developed, there's a creative engine, some sort of a growth and economic opportunity. People move to that area. Housing is typically a byproduct. It's first that before it is what we kind of view it as, that physical manifestation of a neighborhood or community. So just keep that in mind. It's the result. It's really not the start, if you will, of a community. So, as you look at Curry County, there are about 22,000 people. It's 10,400 households. I'm kind of going to walk you down this. The median household income in the county is $38,661. Just for the record, we will end up posting this online, so you guys will have all of these slides in a PDF format. You're welcome to write down anything, but if you want them, you'll have access to that. So again, median household income is about $38,000. So median household income means that there are exactly half that number on the lower end of the spectrum and half that number on the higher end of the spectrum. So we have 5,200 households that earn below that, and we have 5,200 households that earn more than that. For those earning less, typical rule in finance, 3.5 times your household income is about what you can get a mortgage for. So assuming you're on the high end of that bottom sector, you can earn about $135,000. If your household income is less than $38,000, you're at $20,000, roughly times it by 3.5. You can afford a house at about $75,000. Give or take, that's roughly a rule of thumb. As you look at the housing market in Curry County, on Zillow.com, just a couple of days ago, there are 6 houses that are priced $135,000 or less for those 5,208 households, and there are 272 that are actually priced above the $135,000 threshold. That's not surprising to you. The cost of housing here is incredibly expensive. It's the most expensive along the southwest coast. If you break this down further, it continues to get interesting. Can you guys see that pretty well? You can again see on the left-hand side, 6 houses below $135,000. There's 18 houses for sale in the $135 to $200K range, and it works its way up to 209 houses are in the range of $300,000 to $9.99 million. So that's kind of the range of housing that's out on the market right now. If you look at that top cost of housing column, the 209, you'd have to earn $85,000 to $2.8 million to afford those houses, somewhere in that range. Again, 3.5 times income, give or take. So your market leans toward the high end. It doesn't necessarily work for the low end, but it definitely churns at the high end. Probably not telling you anything you don't know, but we want to kind of walk through some of the numbers to see how we got there. How did the numbers end up so skewed toward the top end without anything at the bottom end? So, if you take a look at this, you can start to do a quick comparison between Curry County and Oregon. Over the course of the last 16 years, all of these numbers are comparisons between 2000 and 2016. Our population in the county has slowed considerably. The state of Oregon is up about 16%. We're growing older. We're actually the second oldest in the state at 55 years old. We've increased in age about 13% over the last 16 years. Our incomes have stagnated. And actually, if you adjust for inflation, you can see they're down a little bit. Not uncommon throughout the United States. Housing costs up about 50%. And probably one of the more interesting issues is the percent of the population age 16 and over in the workforce has declined by about 7%. It's 44% of the population are in the workforce, less than half. That's starting to get to a tipping point that is challenging in terms of sustainability. So just keep those numbers in mind. It kind of gives you a perspective with regard to where we sit relative to Oregon. Just the population chart, again, you can see Oregon, pretty steady population growth post-World War II. Curry County had pretty steady population growth, a little bit of a dip there for a while, but over the past 5, 6, 7 years has stagnated. It actually shows a small decline. It's roughly left, let's just say that. So, what's happening? Who's staying in this community, who's coming to this community, and who's leaving this community? This is a chart that compares 2000 to 2016. And as you can see, in 2000, the largest cohort was the silent generation, those folks born between 1925 and 45. As you move to the right, you'll see that in 2016, the largest demographic cohort here is the baby boomer generation. They're about a third of the population. Everyone else is just over half the population, a little over half. And then, of course, there are some that are older and some of the people that have been born since 2000, but they're generally, obviously, not in the housing world yet. They're too young. So that's kind of the makeup of the population. So as we say, 55 is the average age, the median age here. You can see that we're baby boomer heavy here. It's a great environment, beautiful coastline. People have decided to come here. As we dig a little bit further, it's interesting to note that if not for net in-migration, those people moving here, retirees and other folks, if not for them, we would have declined in population steadily by about 0.5% a year. Since the year 2000, there has always been more deaths than births in this county, always. Again, if not for in-migration, which is the top part of that chart, the dark blue, we would have lost population. This chart right here, if it had been a positive birth, net positive birth over death, it would have shown on the top part of that chart. So we're as a community, we're not sustaining our population. Again, that's relative to our age cohorts. If you look to the right, the trend is that will continue over the next 25, 30 years. That we will have more deaths than births, but population will remain relatively steady, 0.5 of 1%, maybe growth, give or take on a given year. So what you see now is likely what will play out in the future. So part of the question is, what's happening? So, well, the word's out. It's a pretty good area, right? Oregonians are moving here, so that's part of your in-migration. The Californians are moving here. Other Americans are moving here. 70% of the county's residents were not born in this county. And so net in-migration is really kind of your sustaining factor in terms of housing and, or dare I say, economic development. It, in and of itself, has started to become your economic development. It's almost your engine. Retiree housing, vacation housing, etc., has become part of your engine. And it, again, based on the prior graph, will probably continue. We call them amenity migrants, or coming to the coast, the forests, the rivers, etc. This is a good place to be. They're sustaining your population. So all these people are coming, and at the same time, our economy from the bottom up is not necessarily churning like we would like it to. Top graph, between World War II and 2010, we built about 192 units of housing a year throughout the county, countywide, not one city, that's countywide. 192 a year. From 2010 to 2016, we've averaged 18 units a year. So these people are coming in, they tend to have equity, they tend to have money, and they need housing. So if the housing's not being built for them, they're going to actually go down the housing ladder and take it from somebody else. They have the money, they have the ability to buy that housing, and so you're starting to see a pinch. This is demand exists, supply does not. Prices go up. Between 2000 and 2016, we wanted to make sure we had an understanding of what the housing composition was. I'll just focus on two of those right now because otherwise there's too many numbers, you guys will kill me. The bottom two, renter-occupied units went up over this period, which is kind of strange. Part of that, we think, was due to the Curry County Hospital being constructed, construction workers coming in, and maybe the subsequent early professional workers going to work at the hospital, needed a place to go. Some housing converted over to rental units, and it kind of accommodated that demand. The other thing that's happened is vacation seasonal housing is up about 20%. That's VRBO, Airbnb, etc. So a lot of the housing is being pulled away from the market and actually going to accommodate the burgeoning resort industry, the vacation industry, if you will. It's also interesting to note owner-occupied units down, actually down about 1%, so not going up, actually going down. It's kind of where you want some of your housing to be.
If you look at the absolute numbers, though, it looks like it's going up. So is that
Oh, sorry, that's a 5. I'm sorry, that's down just a little. Sorry, wrong number there. But it's very steady. It's very steady. This could change. This one will be also. All of these numbers will be interesting to see how it plays out in about 2 years. Once the Curry Hospital and some of the big developments kind of play out, once that settles, you'll probably stay relatively steady there. But you are going to continue to see Airbnb and VRBO probably play a role in your seasonal market. So we want to walk backwards to see what got us to this point in time. And there are a few that we identified 5 issues that we think had impacts to get housing where it is today. One is, are we viewing housing as infrastructure that we need to invest in? We doubt that. The economy is transitioning to a lower wage economy to care for some of the older folks, the retirees, the amenity migrants that are moving in. We are aging, that's a challenge. And there's an economic divide that's happening between those who are from this area and some of the net in-migrants. And we do have 3 distinct markets, which are kind of hard to kind of pin down as you look at the Port Orford to Gold Beach to Brookings. There's some nuanced differences that are a little bit of a challenge. We'll walk through these pretty quickly. So, housing is infrastructure. Historically, communities across America view infrastructure as roads, as sidewalks, we view it in a narrow context, utility lines, etc. And counties and cities typically devote a fair amount of money to those pieces of infrastructure. But what we're not necessarily doing is investing in people. And by people, maybe we mean the roof over their head. Because if we want to engage in the knowledge economy, the future economy, basically our goal will be to provide housing for those people to come here, to be creative, to work in this environment. We're not doing that. We don't really do this anywhere in America that well. A few places are starting to, but we don't do this very well. We don't view housing as infrastructure. And so, can we start to change the way we look at infrastructure? Can we start to change the way we as a county and cities invest in infrastructure? The county invests $11.5 million in roads, almost a third of the budget. We don't put anything into housing. Can we start to change how we view housing? The low-wage service economy that has evolved over the course of the past 35 years is challenging to the area because 40% of the workforce is in primarily accommodations and food services. That's compared to 25% overall for the state. The average hourly wage is about $10 an hour. That equates to about $21,000 a year. That person can afford a rental unit at about $500 a month or a mortgage for that. Again, you're at the $60,000, $70,000 house, a house that doesn't exist. And we also don't have very many apartments priced at $500 or less, because if you can get that, why not throw that into Airbnb, where you can end up with a couple thousand a month. So you can start to see the economic pressures are not necessarily working. Aging. 55.1, we're the second oldest county in the state. And again, we lose population if not for net in-migration. But we wanted to walk through a couple of graphs here because this got really interesting. So some of you may be familiar with population pyramids, where you can start to get a sense of who makes up the different age cohorts, age groups within the county. So this is, these are 5-year age cohorts. Can you guys see that pretty well? Okay. And you can see that right now we're kind of heavy in the 60 to 70-year-old age group. No surprise there. So you can kind of see we're a little off kilter. We're not tipping over like a top, but we're not necessarily a pyramid that we really should be. Where younger generation can replenish from an internal standpoint the older folks. How does that compare to Oregon? So there's Oregon, same year, 2017. So Oregon has, of course, a much more balanced population pyramid. There, it's a little tight at the bottom, but it is a much more balanced pyramid. This is more typical of what you'd see in the nation. Oregon is an older state in the country. It's in the bottom half. It's an older state. But this is not an unpredictable and unexpected pyramid. But what gets interesting is if you start to look at Curry County's projections. Top one is 2000, 2010, the 2017 is the comparison slide, the current slide. We don't have 2018 data yet. And the bottom slide is 2040. It's pretty impressive because 2040, the largest cohort will be those over the age of 85. And women way more than men still. It is a massive responsibility that will be in the hands of the younger folks that are part of this community in the year 2040, assuming that projection stands steady. So it's something to think about. There's nothing wrong with a community that is aging, but you want to prepare for that. You have to have folks that are going to be that are willing to partake in jobs that may not pay that much, whether you're a medical technician or a nurse's aide or you deliver groceries to folks. You've got to make sure that you have that economy to support those people. And if you do have that economy to support people, and wages tend to be below $10 or below $20 an hour, there's no place for them to live. You've got to start to prepare that kind of infrastructure for that workforce. Almost in line with that is a divide that we're starting to see within the county. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but basically the rate of increase for households that are earning $100,000 or greater has grown by about 200%. That's twice as fast as the state of Oregon. The whole country is moving that way to a certain extent. We're just on a fast track. So the economy has been and will likely continue to favor that demographic, that economic cohort, those who make over $100,000. They have choice, they have money, they have opportunity, and it will be challenging for everybody else to compete with that. It's a national issue, it's actually a worldwide issue. Here, it's on steroids. That's a concern. And then,
how much of that income were you able to break out as to whether that was transfer payments?
the income, we are able to ascertain that's total income. There's certainly Social Security income, there's different kinds of income that make up some of that, right? But we couldn't figure out the transfer payments. They don't list that actually. That information's not available. So we're not exactly sure. We know total. So I don't know what percent that may be.
It used to be quite high, so I was curious.
I bet it is still high, but I don't know that number. Yeah, but it's a pretty significant jump to be at about double the rate of growth for that income cohort than Oregon is, because Oregon in and of itself is pretty high compared to the rest of the nation. I won't walk through this too much. You're a big county. You have differences from the north to the south, but it was interesting to kind of break it out and see some of the the differences, whether it was incomes being significantly lower in Harbor as compared to what they were in Brookings right next door, Gold Beach having some of the highest incomes, probably based on some of the workforce here, the hospital, etc. You can start to see that variation. At first glance, you might say, well, some of the areas need a little bit more help with regard to affordable housing or workforce housing. You might be right, but at the end of the day, all of the communities have an upper end, a middle end, and a lower end, and all of them are lopsided when it comes to housing. So,
Adding those numbers up, it comes to like 12,000 and 22 in the county, like 22,000 for all the rest of those people.
those are outside of the county. So those 3 cities make up about 54% of the county. Everybody else is in unincorporated county. Yep. Yeah, if you don't include Harbor, the 3 incorporated cities are about 45% of the county. If you include Harbor, it's almost 55% of the county. The rest are in unincorporated areas. Just outside the boundary lines, some people choose to be outside city boundary lines for various political and or taxation reasons. But those are about, call it half-ish of the county. So, in a nutshell, we have a number of unique circumstances that are impacting the county. Again, infusion of wealth, but there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of economic activity at the top of the spectrum, not nearly as much at the bottom. And ultimately, this is the disconnect we have to resolve. This is an economic disconnect, but an economic disconnect is a disconnect that impacts housing. So, how do we begin to look at this? So thanks, Jefferson Starship. I said earlier, typically, economic driver, people come in, housing gets built. Historically, that was the case here, but now housing is our economy. Housing is part of who we are. Nothing wrong with that as long as we keep housing diversified. And so, our challenge moving forward will be to ensure that we have housing for median income and lower households. And in fact, I would make the argument that not only median income, which would be 100% of household income, $38,600, but you're getting near a situation where you need housing for 120% of area median income, 150% of area median income, just given the cost of housing in the county. So, how do we start to do it? Well, it's simple. It's just not easy. It's not easy. The answer is simple. Build housing. Invest in housing. You got to put money toward housing. And so you don't have to look at this chart again. We'll provide these slides. But in a nutshell, probably starting smaller and diversifying the housing to be built and rehabilitated throughout the county is the right way to go. This is a representative graphic that we think is potentially viable for the county. 6 new houses a year, 3 new builds, 3 rehabs. If you take a look at the cost of new construction and rehabilitation, you'll see where the gap is to get it, where a median income household could afford it. I'll use the top one. Land is about $20,000, construction is about $165 a square foot. It ain't gonna get any cheaper, it's only gonna get more, and we can't ask construction people and contractors to not make a profit. They all wanna go home and eat at night too. So that is what it is. Service development charges for your water infrastructure is very expensive, of course, in the state of Oregon. So you've got a house at 1,100 square feet, not a big house, just workforce housing, right? $226,000, and I can afford about a median income household, I can afford $130. We're at minus $96,000. You can see why nobody's building it for me, because not only can I not afford it, they'd have to give me the house and $96,000 and earn no profit. Nobody's gonna do that. We have to provide that housing, we have to fill that gap for that particular house if we want workforce housing. So one of the ways to do it is to dedicate monies to it. We show a potential of $5 million over the course of 10 years. That could be a bond, that could be raising taxes for the county budget. That gives us a $500,000 line item each year. Not gonna happen. I could see some people saying, that ain't gonna happen. It could be
What about an empty house tax? Like we have all these,
phantom house tax.
right?
Absolutely, you could put that in there, right?
Yeah, because that's been something that bothers me. Like I have really nice neighbors that come here 6 days a year. Like, and that's a perfectly good house for somebody.
State like Oregon, you could say, hey, that's not sustainable. That's phantom loads. There's unsustainable energy usage there. Absolutely, you can do that, but you're going to have to do something because you're going to need that money, and none of this will happen without money. This is the worst part of this whole discussion, that if we don't have any money, we can't do anything because we've all bought into this capitalist society called America. Hundreds of years ago we bought in, so we're in, right? And so if we value workforce housing, if we value the workforce, we're going to have to provide housing for it. Before I move from this though, so you say, why would we give somebody $96,000 to move into a house and then how do we recoup the money? They don't get to sell the house and make a profit on it. Without going into details, you could put a deed restriction on it. They're limited to 3% equity gain a year. It always remains as a workforce housing unit. If they sell it, they don't get to sell it at what the market would sell for. They sell it at a reduced deed restricted price. It goes to the next family that is in need of workforce housing. It's only 6 every year for 10 years, so we're looking at 60 units total, but it's a start. If you could do more, I would do more. It's just that if I told you 5 million for 10 years, and if I said it was 10 million, or 10 million for 10 years, $1 million a year, you'd probably throw things at me. But I did sneak it in over here. That we should look at about 2% and go to $1 million a year. I did sneak it in. So it's going to cost money. That's a long way of saying you need somebody who is going to kind of champion it, as you noted. You're going to need advocates. You're going to need political capital and political participation. And there is a responsibility on the county and the cities to start to forward this and seed the opportunities. Most private entities won't jump first.
This seems a little bit like a company-owned town. My dad worked at a mill and all the housing was built by the mill.
We used to provide workforce housing. We used to put the onus on the private entity. We no longer do that anymore. It's interesting watching Amazon, as Amazon makes its choice where headquarters 2 go with 50,000 employees. Some lower-end warehouse folks, some higher-end executives. So it's looking like, without giving the secret, it looks like it's got to be Northern Virginia, right? And so pricey housing. Are they going to provide housing? That wasn't in their bid. They were asking for more incentives from the community. So we don't do that anymore. Now, we as communities, if we want to fight, we're going to have to build the housing, put the brains there, because we don't really need to fight for manufacturing plants and things anymore. We've given that to other countries. We have to fight to just keep the head there, because that's where the knowledge economy is. So now we're paying. You're right. We're flipping that on its head.
I had a real estate agent just tell me recently that she has 2 clients in Brookings that are looking for cheap housing to buy. One of them's a restaurant. I don't know what the other one is. To house their employees. So they are, because of necessity, they are doing workforce. I mean, we've come full circle.
You are exactly right. We'll get to a slide here where you can start to see the impact this has on the workforce. Absolutely. We are coming full circle. I think there's an opportunity for some of the private folks to go back to that methodology that we used to do, but I also think that it's kind of going to have to be a bit of a public-private partnership, because most of the private entities aren't going to be willing to take the first step. Partly they're afraid, and partly they don't understand what the first step might be in the political climate that exists here. They don't know yet, so they're scared, although it's interesting that they're walking into it. 2 of them at least.
The other thing we're finding are there are private parties out there that are willing to go in and buy property and rehab and do things, but they're bumping up against the banks. Or they're bumping up against a perception that there's not enough, you don't need any housing. There was a group that was going to be here today, they weren't able to make it, a couple that are developing property in Langlois. And they've done everything they could, they selected the bank, and then the appraiser came over and said, you don't have an economy here, you don't need workforce housing, there's plenty of workforce housing there, but there isn't, and yet we have a need from Coast Community Health in Bandon, we have other things that they would love to have that area be available for their employees to live. So we also got to get the banks involved in this too. We need to have them come to the table and help in this proposition.
The banks are typically about 5 years behind where social consciousnesses, right? I mean, not because they're bad people, not at all. I'm not saying that. Maybe I'm not. But they are just behind in terms of how the spreadsheets work, how the trend lines work. They're always going to be a little bit behind. They only invest in what is safe, and so we'll have to push them, and it can be taxing. So, how do we get out of this? What do we do? How do we move forward? I'll read these quickly, but we'll walk through them one slide at a time, and then we're pretty much done. Create a housing trust. There has to be an entity that we all understand is accountable and is a place where we can put our monies. There has to be a financial commitment from government. Government seeds virtually everything that happens. I know we sometimes think that government's a little behind, government's a little this. Government invented the internet in the 50s and 60s. They didn't share it with us until much later. Sometimes if government wants to do something, they can do it, right? It was a Pentagon project. So all I'm saying is don't distrust them as much as we tend to, because I think it's easy, kind of low-hanging fruit. They can do some things. We have to update our governmental toolkits, plans, zoning codes, etc. They're working against us right now. We have to have a financial commitment, and then of course, there are some specific projects in the county. This one in particular is in Brookings, the US Borax site. Opportunities that maybe we could have capitalized on a little bit more. So, again, a housing trust, I'll let you read the definition of that, but it's basically a place where we can invest our funds, both public and private. It could be an umbrella organization. You guys have tremendous nonprofit groups here, whether it's United Way, whether it's Orca, whether it's NeighborWorks, et cetera, getting them together under kind of one umbrella, and there's got to be one person, one entity, one board accountable. We have to be able to throw our money there, and we can't worry about, are we using federal funds? Are we worried about, there's 60% of area median income, and this family's at 72%. We have to have the freedom and the flexibility, so it has to be local. We have to be able to put local funds, public and private. We have to be able to control our destiny, and it'll take skin in the game. I wouldn't count on Washington, D.C., whether you counted on them in the old administration or the new. You might have been foolish. I don't think that they're coming to save us anytime soon, so it'll be our investment. We have to think of it that way. Again, that's kind of walking through the numbers to build a house. Those are a given, those are facts, and those aren't changing. So we're always going to have a deficit for a median household income to buy an 1,100 square foot house. Can we get the county on board? Or the cities? You have 3 powerful cities that are, again, 50% of this economy, 50% of the population, give or take. Can we get some commitment from the county? Again, I snuck in the 2% to $1 million for the year on that one. Can we get some money from them? Can we bond? What can we do? Part of this is selling it. Part of this is reaching out to the greater community and making sure that people understand the need. So it's going to take money, and it's going to take county and cities jumping on the bandwagon early.
Are you making any recommendations as to how many of these would be rentals versus ownership, or are you supporting?
We're not. Our initial thought is do workforce housing that's a for sale product, because it's easy and it's low hanging fruit, right? People can get on board with that. You see a couple of those go up in your community, people get pretty excited about it, right? They see people move in and they don't necessarily think they're those people. You have to see it to believe it. It's hard to explain. But if you wanted to do rental, you can actually get probably an extra 1 or 2 units. If you do rental, we're recommending 6 based on the $500,000 a year. If you do rental, you could probably get about 8 units. So mix and match is fine. Some rehab, some new construction, that's fine. But mix it up and just get units on the ground. If people see them, they'll believe it. I would also say, again, there's an opportunity for the cities to work with the county. I do think that if a Gold Beach and a Port Orford and a Brookings and a Harbor throw in some money into a housing trust fund, we get $500,000 or so on a line item every year from the county. We can start to actually do some decent housing. Again, county, $11.6 million toward road infrastructure. Just give us the 0.6 of that million. You keep the other 11. We're good. We'll have a few potholes, but we'll have housing. Employers, to your point, Did this come out clean enough? Okay. This was from the Curry County Health Assessment. So you can see what many people in the community said. This is just, these are just a few quotes. Pretty much every single piece of input we saw for that study, which was independent of ours, discussed housing. The health of the community is dependent upon housing. People like shelter. People like a roof over their head. People need that. Employers expect it. Employees want it. So, housing matters. We think it's important that the employers play a role in this. Again, we don't necessarily think they'll lead. They haven't yet. But there is the opportunity to public-private partnership with them. And employers have a need and they have a responsibility to, I think, assist with housing. I think that we're going to see a trend across America over the next 10 or 20 years where we're going to start holding them a bit more accountable for some of the wages they pay and the lack of ability for their employees to find housing in those communities. So be the leader in that, jump on that. The governmental toolkits. We're not really giving the public the opportunity to think forward. Most of our plans, our visioning and our comprehensive planning, which are the tools the county and the cities use to make their budgets, are pretty outdated. Some are over 40 years old, some are hovering in the 30-year-old range, and some are just goals. They don't really have a vision or a plan. They don't tell us what our community values. Update those. We have got to update what we want to be. If we don't know where we want to go, any path will take us there, but that's not necessarily working. I think we need a path, so update those. That way, you can hold government officials accountable when it comes time to do budgeting. If everybody says at the end of a comprehensive plan process, our goal is to have the best road going through this community. Well, then you'll invest in roads. But if it was a full community, a full housing ladder, low to high, a diverse economically community, then you'll start to invest there. But right now, none of your plans are taking you there, and there's no reason for any of your officials to dedicate monies there. Some of the regulatory tools, I won't go into these, but they're important. Service development charges, can we waive them? Can we spread the repayment back for people at median household income so they don't have to pay $11,000 up front? That's a big hit if you're buying a house for $150,000. You said I had to throw in an extra 11. I don't have it. Can I finance it? Can I spread it out? Can you waive it for me? Or is that a can?
It's an inaccurate number.
It's an inaccurate?
It's around 15,000 and Brookings is 17,000.
Okay, and we did take in the county as well, so we averaged it out. So it's 17 and 15, is that what you said? Okay, so make those numbers go higher. That's worse, right? That's actually more challenging. At 17,000, if I were buying a $150,000 house, 130, let's be honest, that's what I can afford at median income, you're at almost 20, 16% of my entire house cost is just a fee, right? That's onerous on people at that income. Tough, spread it out. Look at mixed-use zoning, look at the opportunity with accessory dwelling units. Take advantage of these opportunities to get workforce housing on the ground. This was just a specific one because it's kind of a demonstration project. So the US Borax site, is everybody familiar with that down at Brookings? Okay, so everybody knows that one. So 1,000 units, we did it in 2004, we negotiated the agreement, we renegotiated in 2015. In 2015, the city, to their credit, did say we want 10 affordable housing units to go in pretty early on in the first phase of that project. That was pretty good in terms of the renegotiation. They gave them an additional 10 or 12 years, I think, to build that project out because the economy, of course, hit a snafu in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we started to get there just a little bit with the affordable housing units, but it wasn't enough. Most communities, I can tell you, that are dealing with workforce housing issues, and not to the degree that you guys are getting 20% of inclusionary zoning. That's inclusionary zoning is we require you, if you're building a development, to include low-income, affordable, workforce, attainable community housing, call it what you will, it's got names all over the country. We require that to be built in. We might give you a little carrot, a little bit of extra density on some of the market rates, but we're going to get our affordable housing. We didn't necessarily do that with US Borax, and I think that it was a missed opportunity, but can we go back to the table? Can we renegotiate? give a little to get a little, because 1,000 units, even if we got 10%, 100 units of workforce housing would go a long way toward helping the Brookings Harbor area. There are little things that we can do. And so 2 slides, we're done. Why should you care? I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but you should care because these are the people that are going to make a difference in your future. Whether it's a phlebotomist, a teacher, or a plumber, they're all going to be important to your future. They don't all make $80,000 and $90,000 and $100,000 a year. It's not the way capitalism was set up, but yet they're important. And so if you want these folks in your community, you'll have to provide the infrastructure for them to be there. It's hard, and it'll cost money, but it is important. And moving forward, I think we often think of housing as just kind of the physical aspect of housing. But housing means much more. Housing defines our neighborhoods. It provides a social equity. It allows us to live next door to people that are similar and different from us. It's okay to have for your neighbor to have a 4,500 square foot house, and it's okay for you to have an 800 square foot house. We don't all need the same thing, but I think that if we don't start speaking up about what our values as a community are, I think it'll be too late. We'll address it not as an opportunity, but as a crisis, which is typically how we make change. And given the direction in terms of our demographics, I think doing something sooner than later would be beneficial. But it's really about a value statement. I think that that's the most important thing I can say. And then the other thing I want to say is this. You know, as we looked at some of those numbers and we looked at who was moving into the area, we talked about the retirees and the amenity migrants. It's important to note they offer so much to this community. They have a wealth of knowledge. They have backgrounds throughout the country that we could tap, that the young people could tap. And the opportunity to do something really creative and really unique to bring those 2 groups together, the locals, the young people, as well as the retirees who maybe have time on their hands and could really lend a tremendous amount to the community, is something that I think that we as a nation miss, and I think that you guys have an opportunity to kind of lead in that regard, to kind of relink those groups. They don't have to be so disparate, and relinking them socially can help to relink them economically. If somebody moves into this area from Northern California and they buy a $500,000 house, they're at a very different demographic than somebody who's working as a property manager cleaning the VRBO and Airbnb houses. They're at a very different place. But if there can be a connection, the person that moved in would probably not oppose a 1% tax increase that might help the person that is a part of their life, whether just as an employee or as a person they see in their neighborhood. The point is, there's got to be that connection. And I think that you guys have that opportunity. You're small enough, 1. 2, you have a number of very progressive nonprofits. The organizations here are incredible. So I would just leave with that, because I think that connection, that social connection, can actually lead to financial opportunity and potentially additional housing. I think there's an opportunity there. That's all I've got. Thanks. Anything else? Any questions?
Questions for Thomas?
You said this is gonna be online?
Yes,
Slides.
I think we'll put it on
On United Way website, it'll be up
on the
tomorrow.
United Way website.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, so one of the pressing issues that we have is lack of available land. And so I don't know that just rezoning or doing a mixed use, zoning would be enough to make enough land available. Also, the county is currently holding on to quite a bit of property that I'm now second guessing letting go. If we were able to put a plan like this in place, it might be worth hanging on to for another 10 years.
So some of the land is worth hanging on to. You're absolutely right. So you know, when you check out the report, if you go to the United Way website, we did do an analysis of much of the county, certainly all 3 of the cities and some of the unincorporated communities as well, to find out exactly where there are publicly owned lands. So that is all mapped. We've given that to the county and the cities in GIS format, so they'll have all of that information, and the maps are in the appendix in the back, so you can start to see where there may be opportunities for county and cities to give up land. for workforce housing, because that is a good trade. That is a good trade. Don't give everything up. If you know you're going to need a fire station in a neighborhood 10 years down the road, don't give up that block, right? But there are some areas where you could start to, with regard to zoning and mixed use. It always amazes me in America that we build one-story Fred Meyers or one-story grocery stores. We don't require anybody to use the second story for apartments. It blows my mind. We can start to do that with inclusionary zoning and some of the zoning. So it doesn't fix what's on the ground now. It fixes what comes down the road. So it's kind of a implement it and wait and see. So you do have to have a little bit of patience. That's not an immediate fix, but that's a future fix. Again, I think with housing, you attack it with money, you attack it with politics, you attack it with zoning. It's got to be attacked from all fronts. Some are much more quickly going to produce housing, some are going to produce it down the road, and none of them are dying. The builder's dying, which is a benefit.
Do you address, it sounded like you said it's not crisis yet. Living in Brookings, it feels like a crisis.
Well, I wanted to say it was a crisis, and then I thought, no, I don't want people to be mad at me. I'd say you're pretty close, yeah.
Yeah.
You've been on this trend, I would say you've been in a transition mode to this economy, to this place for 35, 40 years. So you're pretty close. I still think that there's opportunities, but you're at a point where you better take advantage of those opportunities.
And how quickly, I mean, did you have a chart in there that showed how quick it's working? Because to me it seems, I'm a numbers and a data person, that once it gets to crisis mode, it's just gonna, it's like a wildfire or a forest fire. It's gonna get really bad.
Could you use a better analogy?
No, you're right.
I mean, it's gonna, because it's gonna affect everything in our economy.
It is your economy. People are your
Yeah.
economy, so you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. I'd say you're close. I don't think anything's at a crisis mode right now. I think you guys have, very little time. I would do it tomorrow. You don't have to do it tonight. But I would start acting pretty quickly. Again, I think that it's been so slow and insidious over the years that you almost haven't seen it. And you're seeing it now. I think many of you have seen it for the last 5 or 10 years, but it's really been 35, 40 years since like 83 on, right? And so you're getting close. I don't think you're there. I always think there's an opportunity, and I am a naive optimist, just to be clear.
Well, I'm
Okay.
I'm an optimist too, but the numbers.
Act
I mean,
now.
I figured this, but you just proved it.
Act now.
Yeah.
Work with your politicians, work with your employers. Act now.
Ready for
Every single unit makes a difference.
Yeah.
So in the Coos County study, Thomas, you told us, or Charles told us, that we would correct ourselves within 15 years,
Well,
right?
we said that. There will be a demographic cliff, so the crisis that you guys have will resolve itself because of death. Just based on the age of people, in about 15 years, a big chunk move on to the next phase of life, right? And so that'll open up some housing, but you have to wait 15 years, and that is a little bit of a crisis. When you get to that mode where people have departed Earth for the next place and you're just waiting for people to infill, we don't understand that place very well. Yeah.
So my question is, what happens if nothing starts getting to be done here in Curry County? What is there?
Well, you guys will be there too. As you saw, your demographic cohort in 2040, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Your largest one was the over 85. They're not really in the workforce over 85, just to be clear. They're actually a little bit dependent upon everybody else who doesn't exist below them. That's a strange place to be, right? And so it could be a crisis unless there's some crazy new technology that comes around that we haven't yet figured out. Yeah, I don't know how that'll work. I think that what will end up happening is if you did correct that, I don't think that reverse pyramid would materialize. I think it would just go straight and everybody would leave because there wouldn't be the medical care and or technicians to take care of me when I'm over 65, 70, 75, 80. I know we'll be living longer in 2040, but there won't be the medical care. And so why stay? So now your entire economy was based on amenity migrant retiree housing, and they've left because there's no medical care, there's no people to take care of them. That would be a crisis.
In your experience, where are some regions that you've seen that have overcome problems similar to what we're seeing here?
Are there some other counties that you've seen or studied perhaps, where we could look at some of their policies and some of the actions they
So
took?
keep in mind, everybody always acts later than they should, okay? Some of the resort communities in the Mountain West are a good example. My community is a very good example. I live in Park City, Utah, and we grew quickly we had a mining community in the early 1900s, and then that faded away in the 30s. We became a ghost town until about the 60s or 70s, and then I think we had this discussion the last time, right? And then we became a place where hippies would just come and hang out and smoke pot and ski. It was kind of like a fun place to be in the 60s and 70s, but it wasn't a real community. We started to grow after that because the amenity migrants found us. And then we held the Olympics, and that changed everything after 2002. And we grew so quickly. And so now we address population 7,500. We have dedicated $40 million over the next 10 years to affordable housing. So it exhausts most of our budget. And so we waited a little too long, but we hit a point where without that workforce, we weren't going to be able to survive. It's a community that has an average house price of over $1.3 million. So doctors and lawyers qualify for affordable housing because, again, 3.5 times income you can afford. If you make $100,000, your wife makes $100,000, you're a doctor, she's a lawyer, you make $200,000, you can afford about $750,000 house. We don't have that in our community. That's not even on the radar. And so you would technically qualify for affordable housing. So when you are discussing phlebotomists and technicians, we want doctors and lawyers and phlebotomists and technicians and plumbers. We want it all, and so we have to pay for it now. So we dedicate about $4 million a year. It's a population of 7,500. Keep that in mind. It's a lot.
About finance. Isn't there a state of Oregon Department of Housing Finance?
You guys have a pretty good housing trust fund at the state level, and so one of the things I would say is tap that. We put that in the report too. Tap that a little bit more. Squeaky wheel gets all the oil, and so tap it a little bit more. They have some monies, and they raise document recording fees for housing throughout the state, and so that's where they get their money, is when you record your fees on a house transaction. So they just doubled their budget, but keep in mind it's spread throughout the state. Portland tends to get a lot of focus in Oregon, and so you might get a little bit, but it's worth trying.
I was thinking they might provide seed money to start a local housing.
They might. It's worth reaching out and asking, yeah, because you do have the housing trust fund at the state level. But again, get a local one, because as much as I said Washington doesn't care about you or me, Portland doesn't care that much either. A little more, not much. But again, it can be done locally, and I think that thinking of housing as coming from the ground up, literally, figuratively, is the way to think about a housing trust fund and or building housing in this community. You have the capacity within this community, more so than most, and so I would say think locally, grow it locally. If you could tap some resources, great, but if they don't materialize, keep going. So you got to pick me off now. Okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. No, this is great.
So, we have a new leadership coming in the county here in the next couple of months. Yeah. And so, I'm wondering what the possibility is. I know it's a lot to ask to maybe get this presentation in front of them at the beginning of the year, but maybe putting it on our local cable channel.
But we'd be more than happy to do that.
We're recording it.
We're recording it now.
And we'd be more than happy to reach out to them and touch base so they understand the importance. We did that up in Coos, actually, and it was really important to reach out to the folks running for politics up there.
That'd be great. And then the other part of my question is, developing the housing, and if it is funded through partial grant and private investment, how could we work to make sure that the ownership of those homes stays local?
So I will tell you, with some of the communities we work with, and kind of answer your question simultaneously to a further extent, is you can put, if a suppose it's a public-private partnership and it's, let's say it's Gold Beach sets up a little housing trust fund here and they get a local business to invest a percent as well, right? Let's say you guys go in 50-50 on that. You can put a deed restriction in there that it has to be a local person, they have to work locally, they have to be from the area. You can put any restrictions on it that you want. You can't discriminate against any certain kind of people, right? But you could put a restriction in terms of geography. You have to work locally or be local, absolutely. And it could be within a radius. In my community, you have to work within the community to qualify for our workforce housing. So we put that in the deed restriction. And that's more than fair. Typically the way that works, you build, let's say you build 6 houses. Let's say all 6 are in Gold Beach, for example. They're all deed restricted, so you can only get 3% equity gain, so they always stay affordable. The city has probably first right of refusal. If somebody sells, they could buy it back. And you throw it into a lottery because you're going to have a number of people who probably qualify. So you create a lottery. We've seen it done in council chambers where they've got 6 houses and 75 people qualified. They're in the lottery. They just literally roll ping pong balls through those old lottery machines, you know, and then you might get it. If you don't, you still remain on the list for the next 6 houses that get built. But you can't put restrictions, work local, live local, etc. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, when you start to see that kind of housing being built, 1 or 2 or 3 houses like that, it makes a significant difference. It starts a little bit of a momentum that you might not have anticipated. It's kind of one of those things you need to see to believe. That's how it plays out.
And then this is just kind of background for me, but what are the plans for the Borax? Because that, I mean, 1,000 units would be quite a swing all of a sudden, if that ever occurs. What is the median home value in that plan development?
Boy, that's a good question. We knew that we would be happy campers, but I will tell you this. I bet you, so the median home value in the county is what, 240, 260,000. It's a little higher down in Brookings, that area. So I bet you new housing, doggone good views, really nice area, banana belt climate. I bet you, I wouldn't say anything under 300, right? And so it doesn't work for workforce housing, right? And they are proposing some, either a hotel or maybe some multifamily units, but multifamily units, depending how cynical you are when you think of developers, might be high-end condos. So who knows exactly what they're going to build, but I would say I wouldn't envision anything under the median house value that exists in the county now. I'd say higher. It's a guess. They haven't started yet. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Tom. That's great. So we're a little bit, running a little bit late, so I'm going to do this really quick. It looks like we have about 32 people in the room. I want to break us out into groups of 8, 4 groups of 8. Makes sense.
What are we writing?
If you want to be a part of the task force, please indicate that either on that form or on a sign-in sheet. You're not willing to put your information out there for everybody at the table. I get it. I didn't ask you to do this, but person. All right, we're going to hear from table 7. age,
approach
on what they've got
There's
written
two
on their
contractors there, one is the electrician and the contractor.
Okay, so
All right, you guys, listen up.
About donating their services.
we felt that some of our assets were land because we felt that some of the zoning, the way that we are district right now, kind of hurts us. And so while we have urban growth boundary challenges, we do have land that could be rezoned. So we thought that was an asset. Correct me if I say this incorrectly. We felt that representation politically and just general local support was a community asset. Opportunities for vertical development. We kind of got into discussion with regard to, we talked a little bit about recommending workforce housing, single-family housing units, and I explained that we feel that that's important because for people in the community to start to see workforce housing, affordable housing, community housing, attainable housing being built, it's important that that the community realizes that's somebody that's buying that house, they're going to take care of it, they're going to fit into the neighborhood. So that's kind of a low-hanging fruit down the road. You may want to look at 2 and 3 and 4 stories for apartment units, but start maybe with housing. It tends to be a little bit easier to get into the neighborhoods of the community, but we do have opportunity for vertical development. The ADU, the accessory dwelling unit legislation, we think is a huge asset for the community. Schools, local schools offering technology classes, construction and trade training is a real opportunity, so that when people say, oh, we've got to bring people in from outside to do any construction, what if we grow it here at home? Maybe a local impact and/or development fee that would be designated for workforce housing, affordable housing. And just somebody commented the local knowledge that is within some of the retirees and the amenity migrants that are here. They have a tremendous amount of knowledge, so and tap that in. We said tap their money a little bit too, so.
Okay, how about you guys here? If you have similar information, just give us what's different from what, as we go through.
Yeah, we do have similar information. School districts, we also mentioned that they're an asset. Having the students actually build like tiny homes, that's happening in Brookings, and being able to put those out and capitalize on that. We identified one person, Rory Smith, who is
He owns Trollo Buns in Hardwick and Brookings.
a business owner that we might be able to tap into for information and money and all sorts of good things. Foreclosures, opportunity there at the county, possibility of being able to turn those around. County properties open for development. Also talked about ADUs, that being an opportunity. Also an opportunity on selling property owners on ADUs. How do we do that? You know, even though we have the option to do it, how do we get them to actually put one on their property and turn it into an affordable housing opportunity?
Go for it, Rusty.
I'm not going to use the mic because I'm already loud enough. Okay, so what we mostly focused on here were assets in, terms of like employers, big employers that we might partner with to, get some work done. So South Coast Lumber, the CCOs, All Care Advanced Health, Fred Meyers, in Port Orford, Pacific Gales, which isn't there yet, but that's going to be a huge thing in the next, 5-10 years? What's the timeline? I don't know what the timeline is. 5 years. Okay. Curry Health Network, the 3 school districts, Freeman Marine, and then we got kind of caught up talking about this idea of taxing people for homes that are empty for long periods of time, or vacation rentals and stuff. And I want to say this is just my own. Oh, and tribes. Some of the local tribes, they've always been super generous and could totally be helpful in this endeavor. And so this is my pitch for, we don't employ a bunch of people, but I work here at the library, and this is an amazing space for a small community, and we can sell, like, this is attractive to people. If people come, I hear all the time, people move here from other places, they come here and they're like, holy crap, this is an amazing library for such a small community. And so I just want to say the things that we're doing here, I feel very strongly are a huge asset to this community. We just got a $1.35 million grant to put on after-school programming over the next 5 years. We're working with workforce development. We're doing a lot of stuff, and so that's my pitch for us being an asset.
Hi, we talked about assets, and under assets, we have city government, specifically the vacation homes, and they're unoccupied, and steps that the city government can take along with the empty homes or zombie homes. We also put the county down, and we mentioned carrots, that the city and county government has the ability to offer what I would call carrots of, we can reduce your fee to hook up your electric, those deposits. People traditionally cut out on their last electric bill because they move out of state, so they just don't pay that last one. So as a municipality, we have to get that deposit up front. So we talked about the property management. We have a lot of our top realtors in the room, but we don't have a lot of property managers here, and they're an asset we wanted to capitalize on. We talked about the large employers. A couple that y'all haven't mentioned yet was our hospital. We talked about Habitat for Humanity. Ben brought that up, and we incorporated that into our local school district, and talking about construction of tiny homes on a school level or a town level, and doing competition of which town can, high school shop class can build the most tiny houses, the most efficient tiny house. And that's about it from our table.
Good, all great ideas. I took pictures of all of your sticky notes, and so we have captured all those ideas. We moved here, my husband's sitting back there, he's a real quiet guy. He puts up with me. He's why I get to do just stuff like this. So I gotta give him a little shout out, because he takes care of me and our home. We moved here in 2012, and we saw this place as a diamond in the rough. We really saw the beauty, the built environment, and the people. And what we bumped up against, just like everybody else, is affordable housing. We were fortunate enough to be able to buy a home when we moved here. But what I hear from more and more people that are coming to the area, that's just not an attainable goal. Unless, of course, they're in that higher market. Rusty, you're right. This is a premier location in Gold Beach, and I think these are the kinds of projects that we can realize if we all work together, live together, and move forward together. So with that, personally, I'd like to just thank everybody for coming out tonight and helping us walk and talk through this, and then I'm going to hand the mic over to Marcia for some closing statements so we can get you all home.
Again, thank you all for coming today. One of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit what's happening in Coos County as a result of our study and where we're at with next steps there. Our task force has continued to meet and regroup. We're now regrouping around, our goal is to add 240 units in the county in the next 10 years. And so our county commissioners have actually adopted a resolution putting that in their plan to support that goal. So at least we have that started. We will be going out to each of the cities to have them also see if they will adopt that goal for the cities itself. We actually have a couple of projects that are in motion right now in the city of Bandon. We have a workforce housing project that's being discussed and actually plans being put in place between Bandon Dunes and the city of Bandon. The city of Bandon has property that they're willing to donate for a workforce housing project. Bandon Dunes has just completed a workforce housing project on their own property and have said that they would donate the plans for that project to the city to move forward. And they also have a developer that they feel that they can help move that project forward. So that is in the process right now. NeighborWorks Umpqua has applied for a Myron Memorial Grant, the Million Months Challenge, I believe it's called. And CZB is actually involved with that as well. And what we're hoping to do is get a $125,000 grant to conceptualize.
Yeah, some feasibility and conceptualization over the next year. They really wanted projects that were completely outside of the box thinking. So not just what everybody's doing every place else, but what are the barriers, what are the opportunities, and how can we get there in a different way? Skip, run, hop, jump, whatever it takes, but get there.
Oops, that's my phone. I know that song. It's my daughter. Excuse me. In Coos Bay, the city of Coos Bay has identified a couple of lots that they are actually donating as well. And they have one that's out for RFP for an affordable housing project. So we have some things that are actually happening around there. Our task force we have a group that's going to be meeting actually tomorrow to talk about how do we measure our progress. What is an affordable house along those numbers, and how are we going to measure our progress so we can see if we're hitting our key milestones as we move forward. In addition, I'm chairing a task force that we're going to be looking into a housing trust fund. What is it going to take to do that? What areas can we tap into to get seed money for that in the county, as well as seeing what organization might take that on, whether it's a United Way of Southwestern Oregon, because it's the county, is it a NeighborWorks Umpqua, figuring out which entity would be the best one to house that. So we are here to help you as you move forward. Please sign up to be a part of the Curry Task Force, because there's exciting things happening, going to be happening in the future. And I want to thank everybody for coming. This has been a great journey, and hope to see you soon.